Always like a real roaring fire, you know. And thanks to YouTube, we don't even have to worry about fire risk. So, a bit of a different angle today. Instead of the mess of my office room, you've got the mess of my living room. And I'm recording this sitting down and chilling out because it's Sunday night, right? And I just want to want to relax. But I have this brain of mine that carries on working. So I'm going to tell you today about an interpretation of Wiccan practices and theology, which you might not have thought about. Because many of the things that are performed in paganism and in Wicca aren't actually specifically from paganism. The vast majority of it you can probably trace back to Sefer HaZarim, which is the Book of Mysteries, which is probably the first, as it were, popular grimoire ever from the Judeo-Christian period, mainly from the Jewish mystics, and uses Kabbalah. Sefer HaZarim was important because it helped to create the idea that divinity could be split up into lots of different sections. It is possible that the existence of Sefer HaZarim could be a response to the history and the social trauma which would have happened in the older periods of the faith when Deuteronomy was written, and thus removing the pantheism from the Middle Eastern beliefs at the time, and thus to create monotheism. But this was like an intellectual exercise for the tribe itself to create change. Subsequent to that time, so it seems, Judeo-Christian mysticism moves into the understanding of the being in two halves, the animus and the anima, in sort of like, isn't it Jungian psychology? Probably. The two halves essentially of the mind, the two halves of the brain, the left and the right, which is then interpreted, strangely enough, in kind of like semi-Eastern ideas, and moving into Wicca, into the duality of male and female, god and goddess. But these things are essentially objects of meditation, but also have numerous different attributes to them and are not specifically gendered. So they can refer to issues of the heart as opposed to issues of the intellect, not suggesting that men are intelligent and women are emotional, but suggesting that there is an emotional component and an intellectual component as well. So that's seeing the same two things from a different point of view and in a different context, but still referring to the mind and trying to use meditative exercises to understand and balance the mind. The mind itself being made up of lots of different sections. If you go into mindfulness, you'll understand that things well up when you're in mindfulness, and that can be to do with all kinds of different aspects of the human psyche, and it provides you with an understanding of it. But instead of it being like a receptive meditation when you're receiving things from your deep subconscious mind, it will be a more direct, controlled meditation, such as when you're using humming or chanting or mantra, you're using sound and vocalization to assist in the change of state of consciousness, and there you're therefore trying to do it in a more formalized way to have a grips with these two things and trying to find a way of balancing them. Reminds me a lot of the Wiccan symbolic great rites, the unity of the athame and the cup, but that has some similar meanings to the balancing of the animus and the anima, the male and the female, the god and the goddess. But it is expressed in a different language, which therefore has more of a reproductive aspect to it, thus suggesting the focus of the Wiccan energy is more to do with prosperity, fertility, and of course, moving forward in life. Just one interpretation, okay? But I'm still seeing it as being the direct connection to the more older Judeo-Christian tradition being expressed in neo-paganism. Then we got the elements of earth, air, fire, and water. Again, these are symbolic. These are predominantly to do with aspects of who you are. The emotional aspects with water, the stability, the material aspect in earth, the intellectual aspects in air, and of course, your energy, your willpower, your drive, and of course your desire to stay warm and cozy and safe, which can be fire when it is controlled. But these are emotional states, and of course you can intellectually expand on these four symbols in different ways. But again, this will be about contemplating them as objects of meditation for personal inner balance and overcoming issues and obstacles. There may have been some variety of cults in various periods in history, which probably ascribe different forms of self-developmental things to these things, but they would have still been cults. These symbols remain open. Again, when we move into Wicca, these things are perceived much more as being the elemental animals, the elemental spirits, the salamanders, the gnomes, the actual creatures, so to speak, the almost cryptids of the four elements. So therefore the animism is taken in a different direction. But also the symbolism themselves still goes back to the idea of this yoga of the mind, whereby things such as invocation and meditation on these four different symbols can have some variety of ability to bring about peace and calm and balance. But again, we're still looking at something which came from Sefer HaZarim. Sefer HaZarim was important because it gave us the 72 demons within Goisha, Lesikir Solomon, that sort of thing. But it also gave us the idea of the angels, of the Enochian system, and from that intellectual standpoint, different forms of spirituality grew. What I'm focusing on here is the things we've got present specifically in Wicca, and showing the similarities that of where it's actually come from, and the fact that there is a philosophical way of looking at these things for contemplation and growth. Now, when it comes to things like the action of demonology and the action of dealing with angels, on the basis that these things are invocable, evocable, consciousness animistic entities, you then have to think about how you're supposed to be perceiving them. Now, your standard body scan meditation provides a certain sense of awareness of your body and also singularity of your mind. Okay, that's what that part of it's good for. Then, and of course, a bit of awareness possibly of the energy field, just a little bit. Then you do the opening up of the chakras: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, brilliant, white, in order. Slow, 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 slow. That then provides you with a little bit more sensitivity. You try and go into mindfulness or try and enter into a mindful state, and therefore there's a possibility of some shimmering things suddenly appearing in your consciousness, which might then give you some indication of something if you do things like calling out or attempting to communicate with a alleged or seeming consciousness which is defined by the symbol, the mythology, and all the other things you built up in your mind as far as what this creature, this entity, this deity could actually be about. That's one way of doing it. But, and essentially that would still be the same kind of state of mind that you would need more or less when doing the dark mirror. But if you're moving directly into the state of mind when you're going to attempt to have genuine angelic communication and to see it rather than just to feel some kind of like energetic emanation from this thing, that's when you have to do the ascension and get literally out of your head. Okay, that's when a sense of perception and awareness and everything about your sense of being is not where it normally is. Behind your eyes, between your ears, somewhere in here. It's not there anymore. In your meditation, you're not looking out of your eyes anymore. Your being is here, above your head, in the 8th chakra. That's where it is. And if you can do it well, at that moment, you will be seeing things with that blue and yellow light, which does not mix to make green. And you'll be seeing all of these beings as being these shimmering, well, not even shimmering, they're just these things made out of this blue and yellow light, and they look like people, and then it all gets rather weird. And of course, then you can possibly have, the angelic experiences in a much more real way. But that's a state of mind which is required for proper demonology, for proper dealing with angels, and also one would assume, if one is a practitioner of Wicca, also your consciousness, your conscious contact with your higher power as you understand it, the divine force, the actual goddess herself. The drawing down of the moon can only happen if you are capable of perceiving at the level whereby that energy can come. Talking very briefly about the circle. Alright, experimentation and experience with the circle itself demonstrates it's a semi-permeable membrane. The creed I was taught in the old days that the circle itself is so holy that if you cross its boundary and you walk across it, you'll have terrible karma against you, is, as far as I can tell, just cult bollocks. Alright? Psychologically, it makes sense to do the archway with your athame or your finger when walking through it and back into it. Psychologically, it makes sense, and you do need to deploy some variety of sane superstition when you're in your meditative state, because it makes it easier for you to be in that believable state. Obviously, once the ritual is completely over, revert back to being a black-hearted, cold-hearted, individual with your analysis and trying to break it down. But you've got to be able to snap back into that rather than staying in the starry-eyed, oh my word, I've seen an angel kind of state. Because if you do that, you're not going to be able to think through what is real and what is not, and you end up in a state of belief. And the state of belief is not necessarily the one which is going to help you to actually understand what you've been through. I am at the age 51 still trying to understand some of the experiences I had at the age 20 and 15 and even 4 sometimes. You know, I mean, the variety of complexity associated with a genuine experience is peculiar. But for some reason, at this time in my life, it's all coming back to me, and it's all kind of like making, you know, the little bits of understanding is kind of like coming back to me and making more sense. I'm going to see it all as being one whopping great whole. Now, my point specifically, I suppose, is that none of the things which is present in what you would call magic in a ceremonial form, or indeed the actions of Wicca or paganism, are specifically pagan. All right? I think that these things are human things. I don't think that you have to participate in the culture wars associated with paganism in order to do it. I don't think you necessarily need to have the group think of paganism in order to do it. And I don't think that you have to follow the traditions. People often say you have to follow the traditions. This is another creedal statement. Okay? Paganism is not a creed-free spirituality these days. I think it needs to move in that direction, but it's not creed-free. Okay, that's where, you know, I feel it's scary. I mean, there's many of the things I've been told by pagans and by Wiccans are of the same order of those told by creationists, and we have to be aware of that too. All right, my interest is in not specifically religion, but specifically trying to work out, you know, what happened to me during all those weird experiences, what is actually true, and I'm therefore interested in magic as a, you know, as a subject, rather than specifically the promotion of any particular spirituality. All right, so I need my contribution to the world to be about the actual, as it were, magic, because that is open to all. That is open to all. Okay, believer, disbeliever, it doesn't matter. Those meditation exercises I'm talking about is essentially the way it's done. All right, that is where the training comes from. And everything else, when you're in expanded states of different types, either the lower level brought about by just the body scan and just the chakras, that's great if you wanted to do dark mirror scrying. Okay? And you wanted to use your chanting and your meditation and building up of the energy and identification with the alleged consciousness which you're trying to communicate with. And then putting your attention, into the action of staring at the reflection of your face in the dark mirror with the candles either side, so you've got light shining on the left and right hand side of your face, so you're looking at the persistence of vision spot in the middle, which then goes all fuzzy because of persistence of vision, and then your mind tries to fill in the gaps and tries to show you what should be there, which is essentially a form of hallucination in a waking state. I think that out of all the tools which is out there, the dark mirror is the most important one for remote viewing in a semi-conscious state, as well as dealing with or perceiving things of a nature of spirits. It's got more potential than any other real tools out there. Dark mirror, variety of dark crystal ball, those are good tools. But again, the tool is useless if you haven't done the meditations. Remember what Nick Frank said when he talked about radionic instruments. He spoke about the instruments as if it was a violin. All right, not instruments in terms of scientific instruments, but instruments in terms of like a violin. And you got to know how to play the violin before you can get a sound out of it. If you gave me a violin, I wouldn't even be able to make it fast. You know what I mean? Right? So you got to be. So what is the art? What is the real craft? The working with mindfulness, the working with the body scan meditation, the chakra meditation, and the ascension meditation to take you outside of your head. Practicing with circle casting by all means, but also draw distinctions between when you're using these things meditatively and contemplatively to attempt to bring about balance and deal with issues and bring your soul back to yourself, or whether it's much more to do with acting in a mediumship manner. All right, most real, in the word vertically real magic is essentially the combination of the spiritual healing understanding that Barbara Ann Brennan has brought us in Hands of Light and Light Emerging, as well as forms of mediumship. And everything else has to come from that point. Talking about servitor creation, expanded the divine level of prayer. When it comes to your circle casting, if you are a person of faith, whether it's the Wiccan faith or whether it's the Christian faith or whatever, do a circle casting and invoke what you regard as being a higher power into it, and do so frequently and with a certain level of intensity. Quiet, calm, tranquil, meditative, expanded state, holy, holy, holy state of mind. Alright? I mean, the Christians don't actually understand how much energy field they can play around with in some of their worshipful states. They really don't know, and they haven't learned how to interact with it properly. But they do a lot of energy raising, I can tell you that for nothing. Shit. So what I've just given you here is essentially the vast majority of knowledge you need about magic. Alright, I mean, you also got to look at the occult writers. Look at Alphonse Louis Constant, okay? On one side of things he says a woman can meditate on the blazing pentagram and she can change the face of the child in her womb into that of, Nero or some other great person, Bollocks, obviously. And then when he actually does his ritual and something actually appears in front of him, he's kind of like, I don't really know what's going on here. It could be psychological. I don't fucking know. Because he doesn't know. Alright, Alphonse Louis Constant is showing evidence in his writings that he doesn't actually know what's going on, because none of us do. Aleister Crowley, in his writings, right, he said about the healing ritual, I think he used the demon Bure in it, that it doesn't matter whether it was spirits that's helped this person, or the fact that someone raised tons of money to send this guy to a warm climate where he could recover from his disease. Aleister Crowley is not totally sure. Okay, he may speak about going into his astral projection as easily as putting on a dressing gown, which is not actually that easy from my point of view, or from most normal people's point of view, which would suggest that, to me, he was very good at all the states of consciousness, or maybe something about his drug habit had somehow done something to his energy system to make it easier for him to do the meditations. We don't know. We haven't been given clear-cut understanding. But there is divine energy brought about by worship, alright, by divine worship. So if you're a god and goddess person, do it. Alright, I encourage you, tonight, Halloween night. Alright, I encourage you on Halloween night, do a full circle casting. Candles, incense, salt, the fucking works, okay? Proper visualize, work well on the visualization. Do the body scan first, then do the chakras, then you do your circle casting in a ritual state when you've already brought about a peaceful state of mind. Then when you're in the circle, then do a lot of your meditation, a lot of your chanting, a lot of your prayerful state. Comfortably sat down, meditative, going in an upward state, and at like about 10-15 minutes into this chanting, ask a question, make a wish, whatever it is, boom, send it out into the energy, just see what happens. Then, essentially, that's all spellcasting really is. It's the raising of the divine energy, and bam, you send it out, one big go. Sometimes you feel like a static shockwave leaving the body when it happens. And that's the intention going out into the universe to do something. Now, if you've invoked an angel to be before you, or a being to be before you, you can send your question in a bolt of energy from your consciousness to the angel. And often, you get a flash of inspiration back that will feel like static electricity touching your head. And that's how Alphonse Louis Constant did it. And that's how I did it about the age of 19 when I had my Angel of Death experience. So, it's all starting to fit in place now. So that's it. That's rather a lot of what all this magic stuff really is. There's a few other little things going on there, but that's it. That's pretty much all you need to know. Halloween night. Do it. Make a video. Tell me what happened. Speak to you in a bit. Bye for now. Oh yeah, by the way, lulu.com. Search for Nick Dutch. Buy something.